Well, hello and welcome to Fuquay-Varina United Methodist Church. My name is Owen. I'm one of the pastors here, if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, and we're glad you're here. We know that life can get crazy, and sometimes we have to find time to worship during the week, and so we have crafted this worship opportunity just for you. We know, nothing's perfect, but whenever you're worshiping and wherever you're worshiping, we're glad that we can be here worshiping together. If you are with us for the first time or you'd like to let us know you're here, if they just got questions we can follow up with, we'd love for you to text us, send the word hello to the number that's right here at the bottom of your screen. We'd love to get back in touch with you as soon as we can to see how we can connect or help solve whatever it is that you've got for us. So don't hesitate to reach out. Also, if this is an opportunity that you regularly participate in and you'd like to partner with us in mission and ministry, we'd love to have that partnership with you as we serve our greater community here around Fuquay-Varina. You can go to our website, fvumc.org/give. And we'd love, again, any sort of support that you can offer will help us continue to do this and do it well. And so you can check that out while you're there. Anything that you need, hopefully, will be right there on our website. Particularly if you're looking for other worship opportunities, you'll be able to see those on our worship page. And again, we're just so glad you're here, and we hope that you find something meaningful, something you can hang your hat on this week as we participate in worship together.
There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Oh, yes.
Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord.
Well, welcome back, everybody. So good to be with you. If this is your first time with us, you're just diving in the middle of this. We're in week 3 of our conversation around 1 Corinthians, and we won't leave you behind, but I really would encourage you to go and check out the last 2 weeks. This is actually my third take. The first one was like 40 minutes, so I'm going to have to cut some stuff out from last week and the week before. So go check it out. It'll be good, but we won't leave you behind. We won't leave you behind today. We've been asking ourselves for the last few weeks this question. Do I spend more time, do I spend more time digging wells or tending fences? Do I spend more time digging wells or tending fences? We borrow this as a metaphor from some Australian cattle farmers who could spend an exorbitant amount of time putting fences up in the vast outback, but instead they dig wells. And while their cattle may wander and graze, they never stray too far from the source of life. And in 1 Corinthians, which is a letter from a pastor to a church in Corinth, this place in Greece, they keep asking their pastor, Paul, where are the fences? Like, where do the fences belong? Who's in? Who's out? Who's right? Who's wrong? And Paul instead refuses to tend fences with them. Instead, Paul spends time digging wells, inviting them to experience so that they can express for the community around them the good news that Jesus is this source of life, this well that never runs dry. And so that's where we've been. And while this is like a really specific letter written to a really specific church in a really specific place. I believe that some of the same things the Corinthian church was up against are really fitting for us. I mean, the Corinthian church was a church in crisis. They were at war with each other, at odds. Everything, sexual ethics, theological differences, worship practices, like which leader was sent by God to be the best leader. Like all of these things were things for this church. And every one of them threatened to kind of rip it apart at the seams. And Paul is responding to them and just inviting them to kind of take a different way, right? This letter is for them, but it may as well be for the church in America today. We spend an excruciating amount of time and energy in the church, putting up fences, tending those fences, and fighting over them. And I think sometimes we do that at the expense of digging wells so that people can experience the source of life that we know to be true, and the good news that Jesus came proclaiming. A good news that Paul articulated for his church was that, on the cross, Jesus had absorbed kind of all the brokenness that the world could bear, had taken the injustice, had taken the brokenness, had taken the evil, even death itself on himself, and had launched off in the resurrection in its place this new creation, this new way of being human, this new way of being community, this new way of being world. And that the church was not waiting to be taken out of the world, but the church was, in fact, heaven sort of invading earth, a foothold for heaven, an outpost of heaven on earth. And Paul says, if we're going to be a part of the church, like we are called together uniquely to be a particular type of people. And he focused a lot on unity, not compromise, and holiness, not self-righteousness. And that's kind of where we've been. Last week, we looked at kind of an additional metaphor to add to that a bounded set and a centered set. Both of these come from math. A bounded set is a plot of static data, and you get to decide who's in and who's out, who's right and who's wrong, which data counts and which data doesn't. And we've been looking instead at a centered set mentality, which puts a point in the middle, and it asks the question: Are people or is your data set, which is not static, they're moving? Are they moving closer to the center, or are they moving further away from it? So you could have a person moving closer to Jesus even though they were far away. And you could have a person really close to Jesus who is moving in the wrong direction. And this really is the question that I believe Paul is asking for us. It's easy, unity and holiness, right? It's easy to see unity at work in that centered set. Today I want to talk about what holiness looks like in a centered set sort of mentality, because that's what Paul is after. To be holy means to be set apart for a purpose. And Paul certainly believed that the church was set apart. The church had been called together uniquely to be the people of God in the way of God, despite the fact that they were surrounded by people living not by the way of God, by the way of the kingdom. And that's Paul's charge for us today. Unity and holiness are two words that I got from a theologian named N.T. Wright. I heard an interview he was doing, and I just was so compelled by what he said. I've been talking about the first half of his quote, unity and holiness. I'd like to share the second half because I think it'll be helpful for the next half of our series together. He says, it's easy to have unity without holiness. And it's easy to have holiness without unity. But having unity and holiness is hard. And that was Paul's project. Unity without holiness, anything goes. We just get along. That's easy. Holiness, like having things exactly the way I believe they ought to be, but no unity. That's easy. We do that today really well. Like everyone slice everything up into a smaller and smaller slice of the pie. We all go into our corners, and lo and behold, everyone looks, thinks, and acts just like us. It's easy to have unity. It's easy to have holiness without unity, but having both together is a challenge, and it's the challenge we come to today. We're in a section that spans from chapter 5 to chapter 10 in 1 Corinthians. I'd encourage you to go read the whole thing. In this, really, there are two issues: marriage, sexual ethics, and food sacrifice to idols. And at first, to us, it may seem kind of random to put these two things together in a sermon. They seem like two different things. Sexual ethics feels to us like a contemporary issue, right? Food sacrifice to idols, doesn't. We go to the butcher shop in Anger to get our meat. We don't go to a temple to get our meat. But I think for them and for us, these things are actually really connected. They have to do with what we do with our bodies, right? And the gospel of Jesus, the good news of Jesus is an incarnated reality. It's a lived reality. It may be a spiritual reality, but that spiritual reality has to have some sort of lived ethic to it in essence. And that's what holiness looks like, right? How we do that in an embodied sort of way. For them at the time, they really were connected. Philosophically and culturally, they were connected. So at the time, the Epicurean philosophy, and for the Greeks, an Epicurean philosophy would have been almost had like a religious status, right? And the idea there was that pleasure is kind of your greatest good. That's an oversimplification, if you'll forgive me. But if pleasure is the greatest end, then our bodies are meant to bring us and to experience pleasure as their greatest good. So if it feels good, it must be good. And obviously the way of God, the way that Paul was articulating, would have kind of been a counterintuitive thing. Our greatest good is to worship God and God alone. And what we do with our bodies is important, but pleasure is not our ultimate good. And so Paul was inviting people to kind of step out of that philosophy. Also, at the same time, sort of culturally and socially, there were all sorts of festivals to Greek and Roman gods that took place on a regular banquet twice a year. There would have been these huge sort of state-sponsored festivals celebrating the imperial cult, like proclaiming that the emperor, Caesar, was Lord. And that would have been the only time that the poorest of the poor would have had a chance to eat meat. The meat that they got during the week, all of that would have come. All these banquets and festivals would have been celebrated, all of them in temples. The meat would have been sacrificed to an idol first, and then it would have been served to the people. And so in a lot of ways, it's the same exact thing that's taking place there. There was a real social order that people had to go to these parties to kind of climb up the social ladder, to rub shoulders with the wealthy and the powerful, to find patronage for their work, whatever it might be. So you had to kind of go to these banquets. Paul was inviting them out of that world and into a new way of being. Both of these cases, the getting along in the nation state involved one way of being, and Paul was inviting them to consider another. And yet, even in that moment, Paul was talking about the grace of Jesus Christ. And the Corinthians were saying, hey, man, you keep telling us, like, yes, you don't want us to live by the ways of the world, but these ways of the world, they no longer have power over us. And so we think we can do these things, right? And they kept using this phrase. They would say to him that all things are lawful to us now, which is a great grace-filled statement. Here's how Paul begins his response, and I'm going to just be in chapter 8 here. He says, now concerning food sacrificed to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge, right? This knowledge that nothing is illegal to us anymore, right? The fences have kind of disappeared. He says, we all know that, we have that knowledge. He says, however, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. So obviously he is warning them about their particular understanding and philosophy. He says, anyone who claims to know something does not yet have the necessary knowledge. But anyone who loves God is known by him. Hence, as to the eating of food offered to idols, we know that no idol in the world really exists, and that there's no God but one God. Indeed, even as there are many so-called gods in heaven and earth, yet for us there is only one God, the Father, from whom all things and for whom all things exist, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things and through whom all things exist. So, it's not everyone, however, who has this knowledge. Some have become so accustomed to idols up until now that they still think of the food that they eat as food offered to an idol. And their conscience, because it's not as smart or as strong as yours, you knowledgeable people, being weak, their conscience is defiled. Listen, at the end of the day, he says, food's not going to bring us close to God. We're no worse off if we eat it. We're no better off if we do. But take care that this liberty of yours, right, this freedom of yours, does not somehow become a stumbling block to everybody else. For if others see you who believe in the way of Jesus, you people of knowledge, if they see you eating food and it causes them to experience weakness, he says, then you are sinning against members of your own family by wounding their conscience. And if you're doing that, then you're sinning against Christ. He says, therefore, if food is a cause of their failing, I'll never eat meat so that I don't cause any of them to fall. In a sense, he's saying, listen, you can put the fence here, you can put the fence there. Your bounded set can be wide, your bounded set can be narrow. He said at the end of the day, there's something far greater at stake here, something far greater than steak here. And sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but it occurred to me. So there you go. You have my pun for the day. Here's what was at stake for Paul, if we could, just for a moment. Let's go back to the very beginning of Scripture, to Genesis, okay? When God creates humanity, God puts God's image in us. we bear the image of God. We have this beautiful gift from God that we carry around with us. We reflect God in the world. The Imago Dei is what we call it, right? And God gave us this image and then gave us dominion over the creation to rule it as God would rule it on behalf of God, bearing God's image in the world to cultivate things, right? To cultivate life, to cultivate community, to cultivate shalom. God created the world in shalom. It means peace, like harmony and flourishing, everything like it's supposed to be. God sent us to rule the world, gave us his image, sent us to rule the world in God's image, right? By God's way. But we, in the very beginning, we decided that we could rule better than God was teaching us. And we substituted our own sense of good and evil for God's, and we ruled that way. 9 chapters later, we are sitting in the smoldering wreckage of our leadership in a place called Babylon. Right? Our rule, our way, our style of leadership, our style of rule, our style of dominion wound us up in this foreign place, Babylon, in, like I said, the smoldering wreckage of our own decision, our own definitions of good and evil. But God chose to rescue us, right? And so God works through a family, Abraham and Sarah. He brings them out of Babylon. He takes them around and he sends them to the promised land. He says that through their family, all the families of the earth will be blessed. That story kind of finds its fulfillment in Moses when Moses leads them through the wilderness and into the promised land with this big old family that God had promised to Abraham. And God gives to the people through Moses a law, a way of helping them re-understand, kind of capitulate God's definition and understanding of good and evil so that they could live in the shalom, the kind of as it should be-ness, the toviness that God created the world. In chapter 5 of Deuteronomy, which is the 5th book of the Bible, God gives the 10 commandments. One of those commandments says, "Thou shalt not make an image of me," right? We are to make no images of God, or what we call an idol. Why does God not want us to make idols in the world, not create images of God in the world? Because God already has. It's us. God has already put God's image in something. When we create images out of the created world, we're actually building things to worship created in our image. Our job is to worship God, not to worship things that we create. And yet, we see that that's exactly where we end up. In chapter 6 of Deuteronomy, God speaks these words through Moses. It's called the Shema. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one." This is actually Jesus quotes the Shema. It sort of sits at the foundation of who the people of God are, as we remember that the God is our God, the Lord alone. This one God of the universe is our God. We are to worship that God. That's what we seem to always forget. And so from that point forward, all the way until we get almost to the very end of the Old Testament, we see this slow and steady unwinding of the path that God led Abraham and his family through from Babylon into the promised land. We unwind that and we find ourselves back in Babylon again, in the smoldering wreckage of our own dominion and leadership. But God rescues us again and brings us back to the promised land. We rebuild the temple, the house of God. But by the time we do that, the Roman Empire exists. The Roman Empire is Babylon, right? It's this sort of anti-Shema. Instead of saying God is Lord of us, one God, we say Caesar is Lord. It's anti-Shema. It's also anti-Shalom. There was this thing called the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. Through violence, they could keep the peace. By keeping their thumb on people, the thumb of oppression on people, they could keep peace, which is peace through violence. That's not Shalom. It's anti-Shalom. Babylon had come to us. We didn't have to go to Babylon again. Babylon's come to us. Jesus enters into that moment, right? He's born in the Holy Land while it's being occupied by Babylon. And Jesus confronts Caesar. Jesus says, there is one Lord. I am the Lord. Jesus is Lord. And Jesus says, we're going to restore shalom. It's called the kingdom of God. Jesus takes that fight to all the principalities and powers of the day. Caesar gives to Jesus, the state gives to Jesus the worst, strongest, most violent power they can, which is the power to take somebody's life. And we see at the end of that story that God is more powerful. And how do we know that? Resurrection. Resurrection. God's power is greater than the greatest power that the greatest empire has on earth. We now have freedom. We have freedom from all of these things that can oppress us, that can tell us that they're Lord. We have freedom to worship God, the one in whose image we have been created. That is what Paul says is at stake. That is who we are called to be. That's who the church is called to be together. And we can't do that, he says, if we're living by the ways of the world, right? Now, he has two phrases kind of on both sides of chapter 8 that I think summarize this, that we'll spend a little bit of time with. The first is in chapter 6, verse 12. He says, and he quotes the Corinthians by saying, all things are lawful for me, right? This is their theological stance. All things are lawful for me, he says, sure, but not all things are beneficial. He says, all things are lawful for me, sure, but I will not be dominated by anything. I will not be dominated by anything. Paul says, in a sense, like, our job is to have dominion over things on behalf of God. If I'm being dominated by something, then I'm not living as an image bearer in the world. Let me summarize it this way, for us today as well as for them. If there is something that rules you, and that something is not God, then no matter what that thing is a problem. Let me say that again. If there is something that rules you, and that thing is not God, then whatever that thing is, it's a problem. For them, it was Epicurean, pleasure is the greatest good. For them, it was this cultural need to kind of be in these parties, to eat the meat next to people that they could rub shoulders with. Our challenge may be different, but I think our challenge is also the same. I just was listening to a guy talk about how he really feels like we, and I was thinking of myself as he was talking about it, like we've been compensating for the difficulty of this season of life that we're in together by sometimes trying to escape with hits of dopamine, whether that's likes on a Facebook page, or gosh, I mean, it could be anything, clicking things that make us angry or afraid, like that gives us that same sort of hit of dopamine, whether it's making bank or making out. Like, we turn to a lot of things to bring us pleasure and relief from the pain that we're experiencing, right? These things, like, even when we're not aware of it, they begin to have dominion over us. If something has power over us and that thing is not God, whatever that thing is a problem. Paul says that thing is called sin, and it's an issue. And we've got to deal with it. He says, you guys are busy fighting over what meat you're eating. I'm telling you, something greater is at stake. You are called to be an image bearer of the divine in the world. Let's focus on that. That's our well. Let's come back to that, right? He says the same thing, again, a little bit differently, in verse 10, 23 and 24. Here it is. He says, all things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial, right? That's what he said earlier in chapter 6. All things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Remember, he says that knowledge puffs up in chapter 8 that you read a second ago. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Okay, he's bringing his argument to conclusion here. He says, all things are lawful, but not all things build up. Do not seek your own advantage, but seek the advantage of others. Fences, laws, rules do a great job of telling us just basically how much we have to do and get away with. 9, you're fine. 10, you're mine, right? A speed limit just tells us how much we can actually get away with speeding. It's a fence. It's a fence. Paul says that does not build up. Like, all things may be lawful. Having a fence may be great, let you know what you can get away with. But not all things build up. And we are called to build up the body in love. He says to them, you have all the right answers, but you have all the wrong applications. Is it possible, I might ask you, that we can be right and still be wrong? That's a question I think we all ought to be wrestling with. Is it possible that we are absolutely right and still wrong at the exact same time? Paul says to us, I think, we have the power to lead people to the well, or we have the power to push people away from it. That's what he's saying in chapter 8, the section we read earlier. I think that's what he's saying here when he talks about building up, thinking about how others are going to see this. What was the exact phrase that he used there? All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Do not seek your own advantage, but those of the others. I mean, that's what he's calling us to do, right? To seek the advantage of the others. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. That's, I think, ultimately what he's inviting us back to. We have the authority. We have the power. We have the right to push people away from the well, or to bring them closer to it. We have the right to eat all the meat we want. Go do it. You got the right. Yeah, if that's what you feel, you have the right to go and eat all that meat. You've got the knowledge. You're strong. That's right. You're right. You're right. You're right. And you have the right to eat it. Go right on ahead for it. But maybe you should consider how you exercising your liberty, your right, is going to affect those around you. And if it's affecting those around you in a negative way, Paul says, and then it's wrong. Your right is wrong. Unity and holiness, I think at the end of the day, as we'll discover, maybe it's next week and or the week after that, unity and holiness find their bond together. Like how we hold unity and holiness together is love. Love is the thing that's going to hold those together. And I'm not talking about love like, oh, we just love everybody. Like love. Love is what's going to hold those things to a covenantal love. Agape love, unconditional love. Love that we see in God for us. Love whose image we are called to bear, to embody in this world. And when we put the needs of others, the welfare of others ahead of our own, I think we see how unity and holiness begin to come back together. Again, I've well reached the end of my time, but I think Paul is getting this from Jesus, who all the time pushed up against the laws and the regulations of the religious elite of his day, those who were really close to the center set but seemed to be moving in the wrong direction. They didn't like the fact that Jesus was flaunting the rules that they put in place to maintain power. And yet over and over again, Jesus came back to this well. He came back to the intent that we are called to be image bearers. In fact, at one point in time, he heals a woman on the Sabbath day, which was a huge no-no, right? And they say, oh, this is one of God's rules. You've broken one of the big 10. And Jesus says, this woman is a child of God, right? She's a daughter of Abraham. And God would want for her to be healed. Like, we're going to heal on the Sabbath. We're going to restore shalom. We're going to bring the kingdom to bear. We're going to be this embodied reality of God's way in the world. We're going to be the image bearers that we are called to be once more. So, do we spend more time digging wells or tending fences? Listen, there's been a lot. There's been a lot in here today. Thank you for sticking with it. I think there's a lot of challenge in here for the church of 22, the church of today, the church in the West, the church in America, the church in Fuquay. And I'm hopeful that there's something in here you can hang your hat on today as we go forward to be this unique people, an embodiment of the way of God in the world around us and all the places that we live, work, and play. I'll be praying for you as you seek unity and holiness in your life this week.
We invite you to stand and sing with us.
Were creation suddenly articulate with 1,000 tongues to lift one cry, then from north to south and east to west we'd hear Christ be magnified.
Were the whole earth echoing his eminence, his name would burst from sea and sky, from rivers to the mountain tops, we'd hear Christ be magnified. Oh, be magnified. Oh, Christ be magnified. Let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, we magnify you, God.
When every creature finds its inmost melody, in every human heart its native cry, oh, then in that hymn of praise. We'll sing, Christ be magnified.
Oh, be magnified, we lifted up our praises. Oh, Christ be magnified, let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, we magnify you, God. Oh, we lift our praises. I won't bow to idols. I'll stand strong and worship you. And if it puts me in the fire, I'll rejoice 'cause you're there too. I won't be formed by feelings. I'll hold fast to what is true. If the cross brings transformation, then I'll be crucified with you. 'Cause death is just a doorway into resurrection life. If I join you in your sufferings, then I'll join you when you rise. And when you return in glory with all the angels and the saints, my heart will still be singing, my soul will be the same. Oh, Christ be magnified, let his grace arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, be magnified. Amen.
Again, it's been great to be with you together today. I would remind you, we'd love to know you're here. If you want to text us, just text the word hello to the number that's at the bottom of your screen. We'd love to follow up with you, particularly if there are questions you have after today's worship, or if there's something we can do to help you take the next step in your life of faith, your journey. We'd love to be able to do that with you, to partner with you in that way. So don't hesitate to reach out. And again, if you'd like to join with us in mission and ministry here in Fuquay-Varina, you can go to our website, fvumc.org/give. We'd love your support. We'd love to partner with you in ministry in all sorts of different ways. We have plenty of other worshiping opportunities live on Sunday morning, as well as throughout the week. And so don't forget to hop over to our website, fvumc.org, to check out all those opportunities. We'd love to get a chance to meet you should the time come. And until then, it's been great to worship together with you today.